kind of at the peak, two-thirds of my people defected, formed a coup against me, and pulled two-thirds of our clients away from our firm. And I think anyone that has founded a business from ground floor and has built something substantial, pretty much everyone I know that's achieved a certain level of success has experienced some sort of betrayal. They had to reinvent themselves. And so that's exactly what I had to do.
Darren, welcome to the Edge for Tomorrow. Thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Could you start with your own quick self intro and tell us what's your mission in one sentence?
Sure. My name is Darren Sugiyama. I am CEO and founder of LIONSMARK Capital. We finance very large life insurance premiums, and we work with the clients of CPAs, estate planning attorneys, money managers, family offices, things like that. They basically bring their high net worth clients to my firm, and we finance the life insurance premiums for their clients for estate planning purposes.
Can you walk us through the classic family inheritance discussion, issues that you see come up between the family, and what actually happens when there's a good deal of inheritance on the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So, under current tax law here in 2025, a married couple has about a $30 million estate tax exemption. And what that means is that the first $30 million that gets inherited by the next generation passes to that next generation free of taxes. However, every dollar above that $30 million threshold is taxed at a rate of 40%. Just as an example, if you have a couple and they're worth $130 million, again, the first 30 million transfers to generation two, no tax consequence, but the remaining $100 million gets taxed at a rate of 40%. So generation two owes $40 million in estate taxes, and they have about 9 months to make that payment. The challenge is that most families that have that level of net worth, a lot of their net worth is caught up in illiquid assets like real estate or maybe a family owned business or maybe both, and they typically don't have a ton of liquidity. So what happens is the kids are put in this position where they have to liquidate assets. In other words, they have to sell off their parents' real estate holdings and sometimes even equity in the business in order to make that payment to the IRS. And that can create some major, major problems. Probably the biggest problem is not what you think it is. Of course, the money issue is obviously an issue, but even more importantly, I might argue, is that it really can lead to the destruction of the interfamily relationships between the surviving siblings. The kids are going to owe those estate taxes. The firstborn son doesn't want to sell off shares of the company because the company's his baby, right? He worked alongside his father his entire life, and he doesn't want to give up control and ownership of the company. His younger sister, let's say, is more talented than him, a better business person than him, but she got passed up as the heir apparent because of the firstborn son rule. So she's kind of bitter about that. She would love to break up the company and sell it off, but maybe she has an emotional attachment to, let's say, the family vacation home and doesn't want to sell that. Then let's say her younger brother is single and ready to mingle. He's in Miami. He's out on the super yacht with the 17 supermodels and lives in the penthouse, and he doesn't want to give up his bachelor toys, right? So now you have three different siblings that are at odds because they're never going to agree on which assets to sell. So they will most likely argue about that to the point of nauseum, and the end result is they end up never speaking to each other ever again. Most of these clients that we work with, when I ask them, was your goal to build this incredible, fabulous empire only to have your kids never talk to each other again once you've passed away? Obviously, the answer is no.
And with that great illustration of what could happen, worst case scenario for the family and their relationships, what kind of action could have prevented this in addition to dealing with the 40% tax in advance?
Yeah, there's several ways that this can be dealt with. The first way is void of life insurance. And all this is, I think, another example of when the properly structured life insurance strategy can be so much more effective than the alternative. The alternative is there's a tax code called Section 6166. And under IRC Section 6166, the estate taxes that are due, again, they're supposed to be paid within 9 months of the second parents passing. If you elect 6166, it essentially allows Generation 2 to pay the estate taxes over a 15-year period. The first 5 years they're paying interest only, so it's essentially a loan from the IRS. And then in years 6 through 15, they can amortize what is left to pay off that tax bill. Ideally, what you want to do is set up an irrevocable trust. In our terms, we call it an ILIT, ILIT, which stands for Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. The trust owns the policy outside the taxable estate. And what my firm does is, again, we finance those premiums. So we work with 19 different banks. The bank funds the premium of those policies, and then the loan is either paid back through the appreciated cash value of the policy, or a portion of the death benefit ends up paying off the bank. And then the net death benefit ends up going to the trust. I like to think that we do more than just sell life insurance policies and structure trusts. I like to think that we are really in the business of preserving the interfamily relationships between the surviving siblings when their very wealthy parents pass away. Right, it's kind of the inevitable.
I know that you've really reshaped the finance life insurance industry, and you've built and led multiple top ranked insurance brokerages. And you also have a challenging story for your business when your trajectory wasn't just straight up at your lowest point, losing most of your team and clients. How did you reflect on that time? Feel free to share where you were at and what did that teach you about rebuilding and resilience?
Yeah, in my mid to late 30s, I built three very successful insurance based firms and made a lot of very young people that were recent college graduates, made them very successful financially in a relatively short amount of time. Kind of at the peak, two-thirds of my people defected, formed a coup against me, and pulled two-thirds of our clients away from our firm. I was stuck with a lot of overhead, a lot of employees on payroll that I still had to pay. It took much longer to rebuild than I was hoping for. And so, kind of at our lowest point in the rebuilding structure, it really made me question a lot of things. I was, in many ways, probably overly generous with the wrong people. And I think anyone that has founded a business from ground floor and has built something substantial, pretty much everyone I know that's achieved a certain level of success has experienced some sort of betrayal. They had to reinvent themselves. And so that's exactly what I had to do. So I started yet a new firm in the space that I'm in now, which is a very small niche within the insurance industry. There's only maybe 15 to 20 firms in the country that specialize in doing what we do, and really only probably less than half a dozen of them that are reputable in doing this kind of what I would call the right way. I went from having a 6,100 square foot office and over 100 people on the sales floor in six different locations to going remote and running with a much smaller crew now. We have about a dozen people in our organization now. We're now generating substantially more net profit, probably 3 or 4 times more net profit now than we were at the peak when I was running a 100-person organization. But during that rebuilding process, my wife, who's been a just fantastic life partner, confidant, business partner, told me, she goes, you can't rebuild a company in 2 years that took you 15 years to build. She says, I think you need to go all in with this new business concept, this new business idea. And I really, in retrospect, look back, I would not have been able to rebuild and build this new model without that incredibly strong belief system that I had at home with my wife. But along the way, what I found as I was trying to rebuild, I didn't just have to rebuild revenue and rebuild the company and rebuild staff. I had to rebuild my spirit, which is arguably the hardest of all those things to rebuild. So even during that time where I took that serious financial hit and that emotional hit, I absolutely had things in my life that I could still be grateful for. And I chose to focus on those things. As time went on, that rebuilt my spirit. And what I found is that when you are operating from a place of gratitude and you're not out there wanting, you're not out there with an agenda to take because you want for nothing, you are pre-programmed now to give. And when you approach life and you approach people with a heart of giving and service, it's amazing how people respond to that. I think there's something in our our humanity that feels that energy of someone that's coming to you when they want something from you versus when they want to give something to you. And things really turned around to the point where now, like I said, business has never been better in the last, has it been now 20? 23 years of me being in this business.
I was so happy hearing first when your wife said, "Go all in." That kind of support is, yeah, that is something to be so grateful for. I don't know how I would have started my business without my husband being like, "Yeah, go all in. Who needs a job?" And, I was feeling really grateful so many times during this podcast and hearing people talk who I just admire what they've done, how they speak, what they've learned. I really appreciate that. And yeah, that deep focus on gratitude. If there was anything else that obviously many things played a part the past 2 decades plus in your success. But is there any sidekick to gratitude that you would give a shout out to?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I think now is a good time to talk about it. What I found was true submission is when you say, whatever the outcome is, because that's what you want for me, that I'm good with that, which is very difficult for a driven type A control freak type of personality like me. I've always felt I was in control of my destiny, right? And so I said, if what's best for my spirit is that I have to lose everything, that I foreclose on the house, and I got to move my family into a studio apartment and start all over again, if that's truly what's best for my spirit, let's go. I'm good with that. It's not what's best for my ego. It's not what's best for my net worth, right? All of those other areas that we think are so important to us that oftentimes we attach our entire identity to those things, how successful we are, what we achieve, things like that. Um, Once you realize that all those things in the bigger picture carry very little meaning in terms of who we actually are, and we're able to divorce ourselves from those things, it's amazing when you let go of those attachments. And ever since then, business has just skyrocketed. And so there's, I don't want to be preaching, right? But I just know in my personal life, that's what I learned based off of my spiritual beliefs. I matured in what I already believed in.
That's a universal lesson, I think, and practice, no matter what religious beliefs you have. But thank you for that.
Majority of time, life does not go as we expect it to go or want it to go, which is very difficult for entrepreneurs to accept because, to a certain degree, you have to have at least a healthy dose of ego to go out on your own and start something from scratch with no guarantees and no initial paycheck, and you're going into debt as you're trying to build this empire that you envision in your head. You have to believe in yourself enough to say, most people will fail, but I'm not one of those most people. And so initially, I think you have to have a little bit of that kind of ego fired, fire in the belly. And the reason is because so many of us were so attached, our image and our ego and our identity is so attached to all these external things. Those things have very little to do with truly what's in here. And I think the sooner a person can really tap into what's in here, they'll realize they already have everything that they need. If you have everything that you need, you're focusing on giving to others. And as if you focus on giving to others, you'll watch your life radically change because people will respond to you completely differently when you're not a taker, when you're a giver.
Let's talk about the book you're writing, Grief Brain. What lessons about navigating grief as a parent, spouse, or entrepreneur do you wish more people understood?
The 13th book that I've authored in my career, and I'm not a quote unquote author per se, right? I run a business. I don't go up to a log cabin in the mountains for 9 months at a time and just write books, right? I do this between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning on my couch in the living room. But I will say that writing a book, the only reason to write a book is that you have a message that you deem so important to the universe that you feel like you need to get that message out almost as an obligation. And that's the way I feel about the writing that I do. I started writing Grief Brain about a year ago. It's an instructional manual for people that want to show up and support a loved one that's going through deep grief. The impetus of me writing this book last year, 2024, my wife and I lost our only child, our only son, at age 14 in a very, very tragic gun accident. It has shaken us to the core. It is 1,000 times more devastating than what you could even imagine. And I have a pretty vivid imagination, and I will tell you, it is a far more traumatic, and it's broken me in a way that I did not think I could be broken. We we look at our this change of events in our life, and it's pretty hard to experience something like that and not ask the question why. Some people will ask that question why in a very bitter kind of way, and I understand that. And if I was going to sit here and try to tell you that I didn't have those experiences and those feelings, I'd be lying to you. Of course, you feel. I mean, I guess the best way I can tell you is I know this to not be true philosophically, but emotionally, I have felt at times like God stopped loving me, and that's um, that's a very lonely feeling. But fortunate for us, we were connected with a really great traumatic grief therapist that shares the same spiritual faith as us. And she really helped us kind of merge our spiritual beliefs with our emotional devastation. And that's a very difficult thing for any of us to reconcile in our earthly experience here is we can believe certain things spiritually, so emotional human beings, and that emotional human experience sometimes feels very contradictory to what we believe philosophically and spiritually. But we were very fortunate that we were put around the right people that helped us kind of navigate through this process. Part of our response to this in terms of our life mission, my wife and I founded a charitable foundation called Life After Love, the Estevan Kane Sugiyama Foundation. That's our son's name. And the foundation's mission is to support other bereaved parents that have lost their children at a young age, and to provide them with the right counseling and therapeutic resources that we were so fortunate to come across. Fortunately for us, we were in a financial situation where we could afford all these different therapies, but they're expensive. And the average American does not have the excess disposable income to be able to afford to go to therapy weekly. It adds up. So the foundation, part of the mission is to provide that financial assistance to those folks, as well as pointing them in the right direction and getting them in touch with the right therapists. Grief Brain is yet another instrument that will be used in this process. That's a response to us again going through this awful, unbelievably traumatic experience. So what I've found is most people, including me, by the way, most people are not trained on grief etiquette. They don't know how to show up for someone that they really care about that's going through something as heavy as this. And so they will either stumble and bumble and inadvertently say or do the wrong thing that becomes very hurtful to the griever, but it's all unintentional. But as I often say, good intentions don't yield great results sometimes. I need help. I, I should have said this. Should have prefaced what I just said with all this. I'm not sitting up on the moral authority high horse saying I know everything about grief and here's what. Don't say this because I'm so smart. The only reason we know what to say and what not to say and what to do and what not to do was because we have incredible, beautiful friends that said and did things that we didn't know we needed, that we so desperately needed. Conversely, we have beautiful, giving friends that love us, that all intentions being good, they stuck their foot in their mouth, they said things that just multiplied our sorrow unintentionally. And so I've been speaking on this topic across the country at different conferences within my my financial services industry. And so I believe that the work that we are doing and the work that we will do through the foundation will be beautiful. It will not take away our pain, but it might help others that share this deep-seated pain, might help them learn how to survive, how to navigate through all this.
Well, that's an example of one of the better ways that someone can show up for someone, whether from personal experience or just a story.
Yeah, I'll share several things. The easiest, simplest thing you can do is continue to follow up, continue to reach out to the grieving person. Usually people don't do that. Oftentimes they don't do it even up front because they're so uncomfortable. They don't know what to say or do. So they avoid the thing altogether. And then the griever feels very isolated. They don't feel loved. They feel forgotten. And they feel like the loved one that they lost is also forgotten, which is a griever's number one fear, that the rest of the world will move on and forget about their loved one that's since passed away. I have three very special friends that reach out to me weekly, and one of them almost daily. A simple text saying, thinking about you. There's nothing they're going to say to take away my pain. They can't solve my problem. They're not going to make me feel better, right? I'm in deep sorrow. But what does feel me make me feel loved and supported is someone acknowledging, I know you're in pain. Just saying, I think about you. I had one friend say, every day I wake up in the morning and I think about what you and your wife Amelia are going through. Just the fact that someone else is thinking about our situation that frequently is so heartwarming. Say the departed loved one's name. Our therapist from the very beginning said it's so important. You need to surround yourself with people that are not afraid to say your son Esteban's name. People think that saying his name or talking about him is going to intensify my sorrow. It's just the opposite. The more people talk about fond memories they have of him, or they talk about the relationship, the father-son relationship that I had with Esteban, or the mother-son relationship that my wife had with our son, those things are so heartwarming because it makes the grieving person feel like that person's life mattered. I don't like talking about his death, how it happened, where it happened, who it happened around, who's at fault. All those things, they make me angry. Yeah. But telling stories about the departed love is a wonderful gift that you can share with that person that's in deep grief.
Thank you. I have a I actually have a friend who I need to reach out to more now. I can definitely relate to the people that you spoke of who don't know what to do and end up saying less than they could and that they want to, right? And then the person wants them to. I also just find it relevant to share. My father's a psychotherapist, and my sister is a clergy and leads a congregation in faith. And just definitely having gratitude around being exposed to those two types of healers, whatever you want to call people that, know how to talk about grief and who've taught me a lot. I really look forward to reading your book, and I hope I get a signed copy when I purchase one. If this feels like a good question, I'd love to connect the dots now between your book, your experiences, your success, the niche you obviously chose that is related to a lot of this, and then the emotional legacy that families leave behind. How do you connect the dots between all of this?
Yeah, in the life insurance space, we're not in the life insurance business. We're in the death insurance business. And what we're doing is planning the next step that a family takes when the matriarch or patriarch of the family passes from a financial standpoint. All right. And we go into great depths of the mathematics and the algorithms and the calculating all these different financial formulas to come up with the best financial solution for them. But in our entire industry, no one ever trains life insurance advisors on what to say to a grieving client. This is the business that we're in. This seems absolutely insane to me. No one is equipped, no one is prepared, no one is trained. My hope is that part of the work that we're doing in this space not only helps the general population learn how to support someone that's going through deep grief, but even in my own industry, to bring awareness to my industry that there are really comforting things you can say and do for a client that just lost the most important person in their life. And there are also things that you can say and do that will be more damaging, will cause more hurt, and will deepen their sorrow. And you won't even be aware that you're saying and doing these so called wrong things. And so, if we approach this from a standpoint of I don't think anyone thinks, oh, I don't want to be a more compassionate person. I think most people want to be decent human beings. You can't go wrong with increasing your ability to be more compassionate or to be more kind, to be more considerate and sensitive regarding what a person's going through. I will often say, just because you're right does not give you the authority to communicate that in an unkind way. And so, if we can focus on that sensitivity and being kind and being thoughtful, we might not be able to change the world with a capital W, but we can change our own little world with a lowercase w. And hopefully, we'll create a ripple effect that will affect the greater world with a capital W.